one of them being my wife, I gotta be really careful what I say too, so it's Becky. See what happens when you don't agree with me? Take care of it. Last night. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Okay. Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight, you guys. We're going to be going over the HCI Healthy Church Initiative report that came home in your mail over the last week or two actually now. Hopefully you've had time to read through that. We'll be going through those recommendations tonight, being able to answer some of your questions, hopefully all your questions. If we get to a question we don't understand, we can always go back to the consultants that wrote that report and ask them the specific questions, but I think we'll be able to get through most of it tonight. Let me start by introducing the leadership team that's been working on this for a full year. We voted this in to look at the Healthy Church Initiative and to start working with the consulting team back in April of last year, so it's actually been a full year now, and we put this team together a full year ago. And so Jim O'Brien, if you want to, you can stand up if you want. Marilyn Bauer. I think everybody knows a lot of you guys, but Jeff, I think you guys, yeah, thanks. All right. Jim Klepper, Con Evans, and Lisa Stivey. And they've done just a fantastic job, along with the consultation team that we've been working with to come up with these recommendations. And I know that many of you have been part of this as well, through either focus groups or coming to the Saturday education that we had downstairs. We put together a report as well as a leadership team. And when I'm talking about coming together a year ago, we put together a report that anybody can go into the office, you know, Cindy, you have a copy of it, I'm sure, that people can take a look at and see all kinds of good stuff about Evangel. You can find out how many square feet the nursery is, or you can find out how many parking spots are out in the parking lot. So all kinds of good stuff. You could find out the top 20 contributors, how many % of our budget that the top 20 contributors give. We gave that consultation team a lot of good information so they could really understand our church and come up with recommendations that fit with what our needs are going forward to make it a healthy church. And so there's lots of good stuff in that. And if you want to take a look at it, it really is in the office and available to anybody. A lot of hard work went into that by these people and Jeff and the staff and others. Okay, like I said, we'll do our best tonight to explain the recommendations, go through them. We have just a few charts we're going to go through. Hopefully that'll clarify questions that you might have in your mind. The way we're going to do it tonight is we'll go through each chart, let the presenter, and we'll all be presenting different ones, go through the chart, and then at the end of the chart, you'll be able to ask questions, make comments, observations. Some of you may have some things, well, you know, if we do this recommendation, I think we should. Okay, we can talk about those kinds of things too. We won't get in depth, but we'd like to see that passion. That passion's what's going to get us further in this. So we'll do that as well. Let me just talk about the kinds of things that'll be in here. Hopefully you've read the report and you saw that it's strengths, weaknesses, and then a set of 5 recommendations. And we'll go through all that. The vote is May 3rd. So hopefully you have that on your calendar. You'll be able to make it at 12:30 on May 3rd. You do have to be here to vote. So hopefully you'll have a chance to make it in and be part of the voting. We want everybody to play a part in that. It's important that we see where everybody is coming from on the recommendations and as we go forward. Before we start on the report though, Jeff, would you pray?
Love to. Yeah. Let's just bow our heads for a moment. Lord, it's always the joy of our lives to be able to come together. We are a people who live in relationship with you, and We recognize you are the one who initiates that. It's by your grace that we even know you, and by your grace that we have come to know each other, some of us for many, many years, and others just a short time. And it was really just a short time ago, God, that we gathered in this place, and we talked about renovating this sanctuary and part of this building, and asking you to bless our conversations, and asking you to bless our decisions, and hoping and trusting that those conversations and decisions would honor you and help us as a congregation be more available to the next generation in ministry. And we're asking for that again. We're asking for that kind of grace and leadership and guidance this evening and Sunday and a week from Sunday, so that we can be all things to all people, that we might win some, that we just might win that extra person or more into the kingdom, and see more lives changed and transformed. And so, God, help us tonight to begin that process of bringing glory to your name through the ways that we envision ministry and mission, that which you have given us to do, Lord, that which will bring about the transformation of the world as we make disciples of Jesus Christ. Bless this time this evening and each person here, and the words that we share, and the meditations of our minds and of our hearts. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Jeff. As Jeff was praying there, boy, it just started hitting me. Saturday morning when I came in for prayer, Randy Jensen was here, and he was praying with me, and he said, he's been praying about this, and something that came to his mind, he said, the phrase that came to his mind is, healthy church initiative begins with me. And Jeff, as you were praying there, boy, that just really hit me. Healthy church initiative begins with me, making disciples of all people. What did Christ ask of us? And so that really hit me as you were saying that. So thanks for that prayer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start with the first one. Looks like you got it up there, Abe. Thank you, Abe, for going through and helping us tonight. I appreciate that. Unsung hero back there. What we're going to go through in the report, what it is an unbiased external view looking through a specific lens. And within the report itself, it talked about the 5 things that they think about as consultants as they build these reports for our church and other churches. Purpose, structure, connectedness, contemporary, and passion. And hopefully don't think of contemporary as being the contemporary service. That's not what it's about. It's really about people in this day and age, how they view our church and how they view us and how they view what we do. And so that's part of the lens that they use. And so they have a specific lens. The external thing is important. And it, you've probably been thinking, I know many of us did. I know council, we talked about it. There's a lot of good things going on at this church. Why do we need to change? What is it that we need to do here? I mean, it's good stuff. We have great preaching. We have wonderful relationships within the church. We got good youth programs. We got good education programs. There's a lot of great stuff going on. Why do we need to change? Well, we talked a lot about that at council. We talked about what is really going on. And by all the numerical measures, we've been on a slow down slope for a number of years. We've lost people in here on Sundays worshiping with us. The numbers are down in Sunday school. The numbers are down the budget. All the numerical numbers are down very slowly. And yet we have so much good stuff going on. And so we thought as a council, and I think we all agree with this now, you need an external catalyst. Without an external catalyst, it's too easy to just keep going on like it is, because there's so much good stuff going on, and you feel good about the church, and you feel good about Evangel, and knowing people know you're from Evangel and what you're doing. But we needed that external catalyst, because we would have just kept going on and on. And so as a council a year ago, we voted to spend some money, $2,500, to get that outside consultancy in and to start taking a look at us with an external viewpoint. How are you guys really doing? Where are you going in the future? What's your vision? Why is it that your numbers are dropping? And that's what this report is really is and what it's about. And that's what you're reading here. based on many inputs, external and internal. Talked about the report in the office. You can take a look at that. That was our internal view of many things. We had a spreadsheet with 50 items that we had to go through and start putting together. And we did that over a period of 4 months or so so we could get those consultants that information. They took that along with, how many were there, 13 guests? How many did we have? 12 or 13 guests that came in, all 3 different services. They took a look at all different kinds of stuff. And Jim, you'll be showing that chart so you can kind of get a view of what they saw as external people coming in. The consultant team came in. There was 3 of them, and they came in and they saw what was going on at church. They did, on the Friday that they came in, we had a number of people doing interviews with them. We also had some focus groups that had really good input with them. And so lots of different input has gone into this. We did surveys. We did surveys, 20, you're gonna talk about that, the Natural Church, Jim will talk about that. We also went out into the community and went door to door and did surveys. We also went to leaders in the community and did surveys and asked what churches need to do. So lots of input, both external and internal, have gone into this. The report was great, wasn't it? Wasn't it great how many good things we're doing? Wasn't it nice to see that the consultants saw the same thing that we're seeing every day about Evangel? In fact, the words that came out of the consultant's mouth was, this was the easiest one we've ever had to do. Because we're not in crisis. But that's a problem too. Because we're not in crisis, it lets us kind of just go along. And yet those numbers keep slipping down. And we've lost some of the younger generation. Just look around. We're all getting older. You getting older? Con maybe not. But Marilyn couldn't even make it home last night without getting hurt. My goodness. So, I don't know, sorry, I didn't mean to make light of you, but anyway. You gotta laugh about it because that's all you can do. Okay. So there are a lot of things we can do better, and there are some things we aren't doing at all. And this one falls back on me. We don't have a vision for the church. And that was a hard thing to try to figure out how to do. How do we build a vision for a church where things are going really good? How do you get people behind something when everyone's saying, but there's so many good things going on, why do we need to change? And so back on me, it was how do we build a vision that we can all get behind and make this church better in the future? How do we grow this church? How do we go from good to great? That was a difficult thing. So there are things we just need. And that external group coming in to help us get that view is really going to help us in this. And we'll have a coach, and that'll really help us as well. And they've gone through this before with other churches. So that's going to be important. We want your feedback tonight. We want to get your perceptions of what you read, of what you're thinking. But we can't change the report. It is a report that they wrote. We're not going to change the words in there. You may not like a word. We didn't like words. When we went through it with the team before they wrote it up and sent it out to you and said, you know what? Evangel, the people of Evangel aren't going to like that word. We'd rather have this word. And so they did make some changes. But we won't change the report from now. It is what it is. They've made recommendations. They are general recommendations. It's not an execution plan. It's not. It's general recommendations. If we see something in there and you go, oh my gosh, they're going to take that $100,000 Krug fund and they're going to spend it on millennials. Hang on. Healthy Church Initiative, Healthy Church begins with me. Back to Randy again. It begins with us deciding what's right for our church out of those recommendations and how we implement those things. How do we execute? What is right for us? So they made recommendations. They looked at our church very deeply and saw things they thought we should do and think about. But that doesn't mean we're going to do everything exactly what they said in that report. The general recommendations, though, are very important. We need to think about millennials. We need to think about our structure. We need to think about making worship not just good, but great for everybody. Okay? So that's about that. And how do we do that? We need every one of you. We need much more than you to do what we really want to do to make this church going from good to great. So thank you for coming. I mean, I really meant that when I said that at first. Thank you for coming, because you're all part of this. All right, boy, I've talked enough. Any questions on kind of the general things before we go ahead and start in with strengths? Con's gonna come up first and talk about strengths. But any general kinds of questions about what we're doing here, or how we might do it? Wow. Okay, I guess that's good. All right, I'll leave the report up here, you guys, and you guys can, if we need anything in it, you can grab it and take a look if anybody has any specifics. Other than that, we'll go to strengths.
Okay, so I'll be going over the strengths that were included in the consultant's report. The first one is our children and youth ministries. So as we're all pretty much aware, a lot of the numbers have declined over the years, but these are still very strong programs. And the mystery guests that were here, the consultants, and the congregation has all recognized this. And everybody agrees that this is a key and a strength to build on in the future. We have a great Sunday school program with very dedicated and passionate teachers. The VBS program is growing again and trying new things, externally focused. We have a good youth missions program. Again, our numbers may be down from what they used to be, but when we told the consultants the number of youth who go on these mission trips, they were still blown away by the numbers. So, we're, again, as Bob said, we're not in crisis mode yet, but how do we get from good to great? The nursery is another item in here. It's a great facility, been recently updated. It's a definite strength. So the second strength that they have pointed out would be our music ministry. Both these top two, in any meeting that we've been a part of internally, they're always the top two things that we always come up with too. So it's good to see that externally the consultants recognize too, hey, these are your strengths as well. There's a number of options for people to participate in music ministry. Various choirs, vocal bells, different styles of music, put on many concerts during the year, and other things as well. We recognize that we have a lot of talent musically within the congregation, and the consultants recognize that as well. And they also pointed out and noticed the passion of many of the directors for the Sunday they were here. They raved about a lot of the passion that they showed and their musical ability, so it doesn't go unnoticed. The third thing would be the committed and talented leaders and lay people. They were, again, impressed by the depth and breadth of knowledge and abilities of the leaders and lay people. That they recognize that we have a very committed and talented staff that are very energetic and passionate, and that the lay people are spirit-filled, gifted, and very caring. The fourth strength that they had in the report is the can-do spirit to rally around big events. I would take, for example, the sanctuary renovation. It still amazes me at how well everybody got behind that, and the amount of funds we were able to raise with such a large-scale project. We have our annual rummage sale, which is a major event. Concerts, the last 7 days, getting bigger and better quality production every year. We have the VBS programs, which are growing in scope and scale. And other things with like the trunk or treat Halloween stuff and Easter egg hunts, which again we're trying to open up and get more of an external focus with. These are all examples of the abundance that we have, which leads into their fifth observation of what we have for strengths, and that's an abundance of resources. One of them being our facility. Maybe we at times will take it for granted because we're used to it, but they come in and say, wow, you have a great sanctuary, a great nursery, the multi-purpose room, what a great facility to do multi-purposed activities. But it's a really great facility, and we do have a great location. We're on a busy street, goes right through Rochester. We have the opportunity to be seen by a lot of people, and we've got great people here already. People resources. And then to add on to that, the financial capacity of our congregation. We're able to get behind these big events and generous when we have purposes that we want to get behind, and we have a limited debt as a church, and all of our apportionments are paid in full. So these are the 5 strengths that the team observed for us, and I'm wondering if anybody has any questions or comments about those. Okay. So next we'll go on to the concerns that the team included in the report. So the big one is that they really noticed in talking to a lot of the groups and people during the consultation process was the uncertainty about the future. There's a lot of things that play into this. We have 25% lower worship numbers over the last 10 years. There's fewer families worshiping. Fewer volunteers are to draw from. There's a perception of a scarcity of leaders and volunteers, future leaders, and financial resources. How are we going to fund X, Y, and Z? We used to be considered a large church, and now we're at a medium church level. But we still want to offer things that are consistent with a large church. So this often can put a strain on the budget and our people resources. Just things get spread thin. And then the final part of this with the uncertainty about the future is that our congregation is getting older as a whole. With 65% of the population is over the age of 50, and 40% is over the age of 65. So, adding to the uncertainty also plays into the second concern, which is there's a lack of clarity around a vision and a future. So, overall, the mission of the church, which is a given, is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for transformation of the world. And the one thing to understand is, the mission, and we have a mission statement for our church. The mission statement is not the church vision. We don't really have a overall vision for Evangel right now. And what this lack of vision can cause is it can cause communication issues or make financial decisions more difficult, and not lead to a sense of urgency when things are being proposed. So, if there was an overall vision, it kind of unifies everything, and you can ask the question, how does this fit the vision, and use that as a guide to direct our decisions. And to add to this, everything within the vision, it's important to be grounded in Scripture and prayer, and focused on Jesus Christ. So that is still very important, and we're all mindful of that and have that in the forefront. The third concern would be that we have a limited community visibility, and that that results in a diminished awareness of the life-giving opportunities available through Evangel. You know, we're really not that well known within the community. You know, if we were to close our doors tomorrow, how many people would really know? Or if you ask somebody, do you know where Evangel Church is? Maybe they would if you said, you know, we're across the street from Velocity or something. But, you know, we do have this good location, but probably can do a better job of utilizing and maximizing that. You know, and along with the physical location, we also, and presence, we have a virtual presence, an online presence now, that includes website and social media like Facebook and things. And we are there, but you know, we're not currently utilizing these tools to their maximum potential to connect to new people. And you know, there's no online or community buzz really about Evangel. You know, that's something I think we all agree that would be really good to have. The fourth concern is that, you know, we have a limited ability to connect new people to the life of the church and to spiritual growth. You know, one of the key things to get people, especially initially engaged, is radical hospitality. And you know, right now we've made a lot of improvements recently, but you know, at best, you know, things are kind of inconsistent with hospitality. The consultants, you know, they came in late on purpose to the services to observe, and they noticed, you know, inconsistencies on how they were treated and welcomed, and in that aspect. And the other part of this is, you know, not everybody has the same background with Christianity. Not everybody grew up going to church, or maybe even the same denomination. So what do we have for entry points for various levels of faith development and getting those people connected? That's where this concern comes from. And finally, the outreach efforts are limited, and you know, do not focus on building relationships. And I'd say most of the outreach things now are transactional. You know, give money or give a donation of goods, and you know, one thing that we've learned a lot about in the HCI trainings is the need to. It's about relationships, both, you know, within our walls. I think everybody that goes to church knows that relationships are a key part of what it means to be in a church, but then also building relationships within the community and becoming more externally focused. Because, you know, a lot of the people not in church are the people that don't know God and Jesus yet, and they're the people we need to connect with. So, are there any questions or comments about the concerns? I think there's a mic here coming if you...
I might have missed this in the report. I just wondered, how many professions of faith have you had in the last 2 or 3 years?
Okay, so the question was, how many professions of faith have we had in the last 2 or 3 years?
People join the church making a commitment to Jesus.
Yeah, I think that's...
Outside of our confirmation group, which is averaging 8 or 10 or 12 of the 8th graders, we probably only have maybe 2 or 3 adults that come in on confession of faith a year.
Anybody else have comments, questions, observations? Okay, so with that, if we go to the next slide, and then this will start getting us into the recommendations. So this is a copy of a chart that the consultant Diane Owen had at the congregational HCI consultation session down in the multi-purpose room that weekend. And you know, in it you can see the 4 age demographics of adults, and there's a column for the population of each demographic nationally, and then the population of each demographic within Rochester, and finally on the far right is the population in each demographic of within Evangel for our members and leaders. So you can see for the 3 older generations that, you know, we meet or exceed the picture of what Rochester's population is. So that, I mean, that's a good thing. But we're very woefully short on the millennial generation representation within Evangel. But the good news is, that I see here, is, you know, the opportunity is there in Rochester to tap into this generation. They're here, but not here. So if you go to the next chart, please, Dave. We'll get into the first recommendation, which is to focus on reaching the generation of millennials who are largely missing from our church. You know, I've been in several meetings over the last couple of years where people have said, you know, a top concern is, you know, we don't have enough young families here, and this is a recommendation that would address that head on. You know, it's not an easy thing to tackle either, because, you know, we don't have all the answers, and it's not a problem unique to Evangel either. Many of the mainline Christian denominations are having the same issues. But the consultants did provide us some ideas here to get the wheels in motion. The first being, you know, as an older congregation, you know, I've sat on church council for a couple of years now, and some other committees, and I'm usually one of the youngest, if not the youngest one involved, and I'm not even in the scope of the millennial age anymore. So as I say, we need to understand millennials. I'm outside looking in just a little bit still, but so, you know, the way to understand people is to talk to them, have relationships, understand what's going on, and so it's key to form some focus groups with the millennials that are already at our church. You know, understand where they're coming from, what they're looking for in church and from church, and then grow that group to get more data points and information from people outside of Evangel too, and then listen to both churched and unchurched millennials. And, you know, it doesn't just have to be millennials. I mean, just because it says 18 to 34, that's not a solid stopping point, right? So, and there are things we can do. Some churches are doing this well, and there's things we could probably learn from them. They've cited a few churches that we could use for resources, and so that's one possibility of something else we can do. You know, in these groups, you know, try and find out what they want to do to engage their families and children, and how to develop their faith formation. The maybe scary part about this whole recommendation is to be able to give freedom to try things and see what works, because again, not a lot of places are successful with this. So we're kind of in some uncharted territory here, and that's kind of cool too, right? To be the pioneers and figure out why isn't this working the way things are going now. But with that said, you know, it's also important for everything to still be grounded, you know, in a biblical context, and still be Christ-centered in preaching and the teaching within whatever happens here. And one thing that they recommended or proposed was that maybe this could go down this direction, is to launch a church within a church that would be led by the millennials or younger generation, and, you know, see where that goes. It's a very open-ended proposal, and you know, there's a lot of things that we could learn here, but the key is communication and taking the pulse of, start with our existing millennial population and go from there. So I guess I would stop here and see if anybody has any questions. Yes.
Did they give us any churches in Rochester that are doing a good job of reaching the millennials? Did they give us
I don't
any
recall.
examples?
There was a couple that were cited, but they weren't in Rochester.
They weren't in Rochester. Okay.
I think one was in Chicago. Yeah.
We have in Rochester a church that was started to be, excuse me, developed back in 2010. Harvest Bible Church. It has a sanctuary in Kellogg Middle School. It's grown by fourfold, and recently they had to go to 2 services. And I know very well that most of those attendees are within their 30s, as far as 20s to 30s. You know, they're definitely a strong millennial church, so they're growing very fast. It isn't too far away from this church at all. And I was wondering if there's any chance that we would consider like visiting the church, having the church come and visit us, you know, because I think, you know, one of the things they're looking for is a sanctuary of permanence as well, in regards to beyond Kellogg Middle School. That's the reason they had to go to 2 services, for example, 9 and 11, for example, on Sundays. But they've done some different things. I've had a chance to attend the church as well. And there's some excitement there, and I think the lead pastor, Pastor Steve, would be very interested in hearing from us as well in regards to that. They also have other attendees other than millennials as well, but most of their church is attended by millennial congregation. So.
Anything else? Okay. I think we'll move on to the second recommendation, which Jim will be presenting.
Hello, everybody. I'm honored to bring forward recommendation number 2 from our HCI report, Reimagining Our Current Sunday Worship Experience, As we approach this recommendation, we are met with a challenge from the HCI consulting team. It's in the form of a question. It's this: what would it take for Evangel to become the church for our mission field with generationally alert and excellent worship services? Now, some of you might be saying, well, we've already got that. And you would be partially right. We have very good worship here at Evangel. But is it generationally alert? And is it consistently inspiring? To help us determine what our own Evangel families thought about our worship, kind of posing that question then to them in a sense, HCI issued a survey called the National Church Development Profile. And if we could put that slide up right now, that would be great. But this survey was taken by 29 very active, we must go forward a little bit on that one, eh? This survey was taken by 29 very active leaders, members of Evangel, not just anybody, but fully engaged members of our church. They were selected by our HCI, Evangel HCI team, as people who were very, very involved here at Evangel. And the questions included all sorts of things and covered 9 different areas, including empowering leadership, small groups, effective structures, and one of the categories was inspiring worship. I know you can't see that real well, but hopefully you can see it well enough to pick up the results. While inspiring worship did not have a bad overall score, it did rank lower on our Evangel survey. In fact, only need-oriented evangelism ranked lower than inspiring worship from our own church family. Now, this is concerning news. It kind of surprised us a little bit. But now here's some good news. This past year, Bob kind of already alluded to this, Evangel worship also was evaluated by complete strangers in what was known as a mystery guest survey. And there's the slide of that. You're not going to be able to read that very well. We can make copies of these available to you anytime that you would like, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on this evening. I believe we had 12 to 13 different visits to worship here at Evangel from September through December by mystery guests sent by our consultants. We did not know when they were coming. We did not know who they were. And the good news is the mystery audit was actually more favorable than our own internal survey. That's good news. Our mystery guests in general liked our worship. So why the difference between our own church family and our mystery guests on the inspired worship ranking? My take is that Evangel worship is solid. It's consistent. It's well done. The music, the message, it works. But as people attend more and more over the months and years, perhaps it has become a bit routine. Perhaps people in our own church seek more creativity, new ideas, a change of pace once in a while, engaging more of the senses, experiential worship, worship that inspires. So to me, the HCI consultant's question of what would it take to have more excellent worship, combined with the fact that we have some room to approve, makes the recommendation to reimagine our current Sunday worship experience worth vigorously pursuing. And even more, just the magnitude, just the primacy of worship and our relationship of God should motivate us to do this, to reimagine our worship, probably on a continual basis. We should never get too routine with what we're doing in our worship here because it's just so central to our relationship with God. The Bible says in Psalm 147:11, the Lord is pleased with those who worship him and who trust his love. And Jesus, his very own words, said in Matthew 4:10b, he said, we are to worship the Lord and serve him only. Notice the progression of that verse. We are to worship the Lord even before we serve him. So the concept of worship may seem simple, but in the 21st century, its implementation is not. Generationally, we communicate in so many different ways now. The same formats of worship used 20 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, maybe last year, will sometimes be in effect with some of our younger people. So we continually need to reimagine our worship. I know this can be daunting at times, but to me, I like a challenge, and this is very exciting. I believe we have very good worship at Evangel, but I also think we have a growing passion amongst our church family to go from very good to great to excellent to over-the-top worship. Choose your superlative. This is what we are created for as God's people, to worship him. It's the main thing we do, is to worship the one who created us. So as we move forward to reimagine our worship, we do so first and foremost to please God. But we also move forward because we know that worship is also the main portal. It's the main entry point for people who visit our church. Worship is where most people begin. If our worship's under the authority of the Holy Spirit, and we're creative, and we're seeking excellence, and it's generationally alert, then we have a chance to touch these people who first come to worship here with the rest of the Evangel experience. Amazing education and children and youth and music, mission opportunities, potluck meals. Maybe not potluck meals. They're good, though. They are good. I tease people about potluck meals. I say it's very Methodist. So if we will engage in our worship, if we engage people in worship, if we do it well, if they're inspired, maybe then they will engage in the most precious resource then after Jesus that we have to offer them. And that's you, the Evangel family. So where does reimagining our worship experience begin? It begins a step even before we worship. It begins with radical hospitality, and Khan alluded to this for just a moment in his talk. Hospitality, by definition, is the generous and friendly reception of guests. Romans 12:3 says, share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. 1 Peter 4:9 says, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. So hospitality is providing the atmosphere in which strangers are free to become friends, thereby feeling accepted, included, and loved. That relationship thus opens up the possibility for eventual communion and relationship among the host, that would be us, among the stranger, that's the guest, and God. So reimagining our worship starts with welcoming the stranger into our worship and into our fellowship. It begins at the front door of our church. No, make that the parking lot. No, make that the outside building and the grounds as people drive by and look at our church. No, make that our website, which is the first place most people start before they even come to see the church or the parking lot or the front door. Or no, maybe even make that each one of us and how we bring hospitality from our church into our community to love people. Improving our hospitality is a key ingredient, a first step to reimagining our worship. Why? Because once our guests navigate our website, come to the building, park in the parking lot, and walk through the front door, once they finally take a step in, study after study after study after study has said the same thing. Most of those people make their determination if they will ever come back in the first 10 minutes. How was I greeted? Were the people friendly? Are the people friendly but not too friendly? We can go over the top too. Most people who visit for the first time don't want 6 or 8 or 10 people just swarming over them. But they want to be greeted. If they have children, did people acknowledge their kids? One thing I always try to do whenever I can is to get down on one knee in the lobby when I'm meeting some children for the first time and see them eye-to-eye. That might scare the kids. But their parents, it means everything to them, that we're paying attention to their most precious resource when they come here. Is the parking convenient? Is there food? Do I have to pay for it? Is the building easy to navigate? Is there signage? Can I find the restrooms? Where's the nursery? Is the building clean? Is there a brochure I can take home to read more about the church, what they have to offer? Is the seating comfortable? Can I see? Can I hear? Is there room for me in the worship setting that's not too conspicuous? Most visitors don't want to be brought down to the first row or two of the church their very first time. That's uncomfortable for them. Do we leave room for them to sit in less conspicuous places, or do we all sit back there? They might ask, can I make friends here? They might come here once or twice. They might hear good music. They might hear a great message. But if they don't make a friend, eventually they will not return. They need to make friends. These are just a few of the questions we need to ask ourselves in regards to reimagining our worship, even before people worship. Remember, they make that decision in the first 10 minutes when they come to our church. We need to evaluate our hospitality from the perspective of a new person. I'm going to challenge all of you to take a step back and look at our church and try to do that when you come into our building, what you see, how it feels, our people, what's it like? We need to look at that perspective from somebody who's visiting here. Our HCI report said in the mystery guest survey that our hospitality was inconsistent. People had mixed experiences who visited here. Many good experiences, but room to improve, they said. Just a few things they noted. They thought our signage was a little below par. It was kind of hard to see the signs. I know we're making improvements on how they're hanging, but we need to do more. They wanted more information, more written information to take home, brochures, what Evangel has to offer. They wanted to take something with them so they could read up on us if they hadn't already done so on the website. Some people had really friendly visits, and some people did not. Some people found themselves standing alone. Our main consultant came late. They usually come a little bit late. She had a fender bender on the way here, so she was already a little bit stressed. And she was trying to enter the 9:45 worship, and there was a group of people standing in front of the center door, and they wouldn't move so she could get in. They didn't even notice her. They weren't trying to be mean. They weren't going like this, you can't go in. But they were just standing there, oblivious to her guest trying to make it into the worship space. That was our main consultant. Oops. Another person said they looked for the gift at the Welcome Center. Said in the bulletin we had them. Evidently they were there, but our worship center people just didn't know where they were that day. So there were some inconsistencies, but good experiences too. So what do we do now? Well, we evaluate the elements that create a welcoming and hospitable environment so we consistently can love people into our church. That's one of the sweetest phrases I've ever heard from people who eventually joined our church. And I said, what was it that kind of, they said, we were loved into the church. Man, that's a beautiful phrase to hear. So some things we're going to do, we're going to send a hospitality group to a workshop on April 25th. That's this coming weekend. That one's checked off. Hospitality coordinators, we need some to go along with the wonderful Ann Leonard, who coordinates our Welcome Center. And guess what? We have some. Scott and Connie Lutke will be our hospitality coordinators. Wonderful people, and we're going to support them. We'll all support them. Develop an action plan, improve our website, which, by the way, is under construction right now. Abe's been working on that. The improvements are fantastic. We're working on that. Begin reading in the parking lot. That's already started a little bit. We're thinking about guest and parent parking spaces. We have handicap spaces, but we really don't have spaces, especially for guests or parents. We should be looking at that. And we should be parking, if we're able-bodied, where? The very back row of the parking lot. I always look to see who is walking back there with me after church. I say, yeah. So walk with me. It feels good to stretch out the legs a little bit after church. There's more, but I know we don't have tons of time. They thought it would be a good idea if we removed the money basket from the treats table. Reconfigure our treats or coffee area so there's not backups taking place. Sometimes people have to wait in line. Assign specific people to watch for people who are standing alone. That's another recommendation. So radical hospitality is the first way to reimagine our worship, keeping in mind that the first impressions and making friends are a key ingredient to growing our fellowship and helping people to find Jesus or strengthen their relationship with Jesus. And God's word exhorts us to do it. Let's love people into our church. The next step to reimagining worship is to evaluate and then strengthen the worship creativity. The HCI outside consulting team noted in their opinion, our current worship services, the 3 worship services, are not distinctly different. Surprised us a little bit. All 3 containing primarily traditional elements with just a shift in music, primarily the main difference at 11 o'clock. But the worship order, the offering, the message was the same, the delivery, the order of worship had similarities. The day that the HCA consultants were here, we had handbells in the contemporary worship too, and they noted that. We don't have to do it exactly like that. I think it's kind of great to have handbells in contemporary worship, but they said, it's not that contemporary, in their opinion. So the first thing we do is we improve worship evaluation. And we evaluate the services we have now. So what might be a few questions of evaluation of our worship? Here's just a few. What is the need for 3 services? And what must each service style do to engage our mission field? And as you saw by the graph that Khan put up, different age mission fields. Are we doing things to engage all of them? Who's the target audience, and do we understand their needs? Do we continually think outwardly, not just what we like, but what people who might be visiting us might be looking for in worship, while still being sensitive to the needs of our own church family, not taking everything away. We're not going to be about that. But how do we be outward focused, but be generationally relevant in our current Sunday morning services? Everything should be evaluated, even the language we're speaking. Can people understand what we're saying in our worship services? For example, we should evaluate how often we use the word sanctification or justification or prevenient grace unless we're willing to define it. I remember one time myself saying years ago, now we are going to receive the sacrament of communion by intinction. Somebody who maybe hasn't met in church, what are we going to do? I don't know if I want to do that, whatever it is. Or when we sing a phrase in one of our hymns, the wormwood and the gall. What does that mean? Maybe we could take 20 seconds and before we sing that hymn, explain that, give some people a fresh revelation of what that means, and then it'll take on even more meaning as we sing. Evaluate everything, even the worship language we use. Do people know what we're talking about in church? Another question, is it important for each service to be distinct? Right now, that is not the case. Right now, the third service is different from the first two, but is it different enough? We need to evaluate that. Do we understand how new generations communicate or how they want to be communicated to? It's a huge question. I've been doing quite a bit of reading on this the last year or two. And I'm convinced a lot of times some of us are communicating to younger people in a way they don't even want to be communicated to. They don't receive the way we communicate very well as a boomer. I remember about a year ago at Easter, not this Easter, but last one perhaps, or might have been the one before. I thought we just had the greatest 11 o'clock worship service. That's the one I coordinate. And we had rocking music that day with a full band. I thought we had a great multimedia piece, a drama, something for the children, a children's message with take-homes, props, and all that stuff. It felt electrifying to me. But the next day I heard from a parent of a 30-year-old that if their 30-year-old had not had relatives invite them to worship, they might not have been back. And I thought, wow, we didn't connect with that person. What are we missing? We need to have focus groups. We need to talk to people. We need to be willing to change. We need to take more risk in our current worship to ensure our future. It's a risk worth taking. There'll need to be some changes. The next step to reimagining our worship planning and creativity, our HCI consultants want us to consider connecting our worship planning across all three worship services, perhaps with a core planning team. Currently, we have two worship planning teams. We have a traditional worship planning team, and we have a contemporary worship planning team that meets separately. And what it's basically boiled down to now is they just pretty much pick music. That's the main thing that we do, at least in the contemporary. I'm not quite up to speed on traditional. When we add a drama at 11 o'clock or a multimedia piece, usually I find the drama and I give it to somebody to recruit, and we get our actors in. We did this last week. Abe and I meet once every other week or once a week, and we look at multimedia pieces to infuse multimedia into our 11 o'clock worship, which is very effective. But it's done kind of randomly by a single or just two individuals from the team. There is currently not a strong collaborative approach of shared ideas, a creative think tank taking place to generate our worship services here at our church. This is not the best way to achieve creativity, to inspire. So what can we do? The HCI consultants think one thing we might want to consider is the creation of a core team that oversees all three services in the planning and development of worship objectives for each service. The objective would be the same, but the delivery or the implementation would be different. I'm going to give you a quick example of how this would work. We're not supposed to get too much into how-tos, but just so you can get a grasp of what one concept might be. We could have a worship planning core team in our church that would meet at least 6 weeks out from the worship service, at least 6 weeks. Creative ideas take time to implement. Perhaps this core planning team could determine a felt need for that service, which encapsulates the main thought of the worship for that Sunday. That felt need might be love, or it might be belonging, or it might be forgiveness, or it might be discovering our potential. This will be determined by the planning team based upon the pastor's scripture selection and thoughts on that scripture. And then we would spend every week 2 to 3 hours looking at every possible aspect of worship and how we could creatively convey the truth of the scripture in ways that inspire. Maybe a drama, intercessory prayer, testimonies. We've got to do more testimonies in our church. They're contagious, what God is doing in people's lives. Multimedia, litanies, chanting. Who knows? The sky's the limit. The worship team could consist of the pastor, a worship coordinator, representatives from a traditional and contemporary team, millennials, and I know some of our millennials are getting tired of being called millennials because they feel it kind of separates them out, but a younger person or two, different ages, technician, because some of this will require technical work, and a person from visual arts, somebody who would be willing to do that. It wouldn't have to be somebody from but somebody associated with our current team that would meet every week, because the atmosphere of worship, just like in a good education classroom, is often set up by what's in the room. And the visual arts does that so well in our church setting, but we'd be looking at something every week. This would require a substantial investment of time, 2 to 3 hours every week, just for the planning. And then we'd be counting down, so that'd be at 6 weeks, and then the next week, number 6 would be at 5, and you just get updates on that. You'd start a new service at number 6, and you'd count down. So there'd be 6 worship services on the board at one time, all in different levels of preparation until they're launched on their day. The last 7 days concerts was much more than a concert to me. It was a worship experience. And I know the last 7 days is an extreme example, but we can achieve a worship experience like that. We can't expect to have that every week. That took months to prepare. But it shows what we can do when we come together collaboratively and get creative and let people use their gifts. The goal would be to look at where we are today, 2 worship teams meeting separately, one of the teams at least mainly picking music, and then individuals randomly picking other creative elements, to a situation where we have a core team over all 3 services meeting every week for up to 3 hours. So we want to move from where we are today. Last 7 days is over here. That took months to do, but what can we do that's something we can achieve, that's creative? There's a little bit of a look at what could be. We don't know if that will be the concept. I'm just kind of throwing that out tonight. And then lastly, in regards to our worship planning and creativity, we need to engage worship experts and online resources. We need to take much more advantage of what's out there for us to look at, to see. We can bring a worship expert to us. There's several in our conference, and I know there's plenty of those. There's online worship resources that offer revolutionary ideas. We can visit other churches. We can visit other churches' worship services online. We don't always have to go there in person. Lots and lots of books on great worship ideas. There's one of my favorites. I'm not going to share that tonight, but he just basically looked at when the teacher of the law came up to Jesus and asked him what was the greatest commandment. And Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. And then the author goes on to share how we can incorporate that great commandment into our worship by offering elements that engage the heart, soul, the mind, and the strength. Every week, every dimension of that great commandment incorporated somehow into our worship services all the time. There's just so much out there that we can do. All right, that covers the worship planning. Very, very quickly, the last couple things they recommended to us is space improvements. They thought we had a wonderful sanctuary. The big question they had for us is, can the AV booth be moved? And it can't in our current configuration. The renovation team looked at that over and over again. It really has to be where it is. I won't go into why, but it can't be moved. So then they said, well, what about removing the chairs in the back of the sanctuary, putting high-top tables back there? People could sit up and look over the booth. Plus, it would be more of just a friendly kind of place for families to worship from. So they said, why don't you consider that? It could also be an extra overflow for fellowship time between services or at different times of the week if we did that. And they wanted us to consider allowing beverages and treats in worship. Serving on the renovation team and this one, that's contradicting itself a little bit, but that's what they said we should look at. And then finally, they said we should engage the children. The final recommendation to engage the children, evangelists so well known, we're so equipped to minister to children. We're still well known for that in our community, I believe. We have powerful ministries in these areas. But the HCI consultants noticed and received feedback from some of our members that our worship is not all that children or family friendly. What might this say to a younger family with children who want to worship together in our church? Could this be why some of our current families are not worshiping? Because it's not that friendly for their kids. Based on an internal evangel survey a couple years ago, we removed children's sermons from worship time. Maybe we should consider reinstating them once or twice a month, or offer a children-friendly worship once a month. The celebration times that we have 3 times a year are well received here. Palm Sunday and Rally Day, and Christmas program day. People come in droves. Another idea would be to have families worship together for the praise music at 11 and then dismiss the children to a dynamic children's church. And not just plopped into a room, but where we create a space in our church where we have a stage set up for the kids, we have their own lights, their own sound, and just do a blowout children's church after they worship with their parents for the first 20 minutes or so. That'd be another idea. We have a heart for children. How can we be more family friendly in our worship? We need to be thinking about that and how we can do that. In conclusion, are we willing to reimagine our worship here? To be outward focused, generationally alert, invest time and resources into worship that's more consistently inspiring and creative. Have our worship services changed much in the last 10 or 20 years? Do they need to? Or just maybe a little bit? We don't want to take away, but what can we add? Is our worship contributing to people coming back for more and leaving people transformed? Do we allow the Holy Spirit to lead us? Or do we hinder the Spirit? My hope for evangel worship as all our services that we build from going from very good to great, to exceptional, to overwhelming. How wonderful if our worship grew to be so engaging and creative and surprising that people could hardly wait for the next time we gather together to worship. You know, people bought tickets, sold out tickets. The last 7 days was sold out 10 days before it happened. Why can't we create that kind of excitement every week for worship in this church? Where even you folks are out there saying, you've got to come. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be really something. We can, and we should, and we will. Any questions on the worship, re-engaging the worship, reimagining?
Rochester? Are we the only one that has 3 services in Rochester? Most churches, I think.
I don't know what
just
all
have
the other churches do. I know some of the bigger churches have 3 services, but they have one on Saturday night and 2 on Sunday. I don't think there's very many churches that do 3 services as close as we do together on Sunday morning. I think that's unusual. And if you ask the worship teams, it's stressful too. The time in between is very, very tight. And it does hurt us a little bit. So this church has 3 different services, but they're in different places of the building at different times. See, this is what happens when you get together and people start talking. There's all sorts of ways to look at this. I think the way we're doing it now is stressful, though, on the worship teams, and we've been doing it, but I know at 11, if the second service, it usually goes over, it's hard to get everything set up, and sometimes we've had to delay the service by a minute or two just because, and with no sound checks or anything. We just have to go the best we can. But anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm going to be speaking to recommendation number 3. It says, develop a spiritual growth process that covers all ages and provides entry points for new people regardless of where they are on our faith journey. And the first point under that is to evaluate what we have and capitalize on the strength of our Christian education. And we've already discussed that. We know we have really good Christian education and youth programs. And but it's always good to keep those fresh and to make sure we're servicing the people that, all people, no matter where they are on their spiritual journey. Do we have adult classes for the seeker or for the beginning person in their faith? Do we have a Bible 101 class that just says, where is the Old Testament? Where is the New Testament? There are some people that don't even know that. And then we love to have classes for the more mature believers that really want to dig into Bible study. Is that the kind of thing that we can look at offering? It's always good to review and look into that. The other point that has been brought up under that category is our portals of entry. We've talked about getting them into the sanctuary and greeting them and meeting them. Now, how do we stay keeping them connected to the church? All right. According to what they've recommended as a healthy church, you should have groups that meet outside of the church, like 2 times a month, beyond just your worship service. For every 15 members that you have, you should have a group. All right. So according to our worship time, the numbers, we ought to have 20 groups that are meeting outside of the worship service at least twice a month. We have 9. Okay, we have 9, and we need more, because that's where relationships happen. I mean, it's good to get them in the front door, get our hospitality, getting them in the front door, greet them, meet them, connect them with people, and then connect them with some kind of a small group. I know when Scott and I first came to this church, that's what brought us in. The very first week we were here, we saw that there was a young couples group, and then we were a young couple, and we met. We went to the house, we found it, we came to the church, they told us where it was. We had 6 couples that have been our friends ever since. And that's where relationships happen, and we need to do better at that, and we need to do more of that. And how do we do that? Well, there's help out there. We can get conference help. We can send people to workshops. We can go to training and invest in those trainings of people. We need you. We need the people of this church to be willing to start small groups. New people want to join new groups. They don't really like to join existing groups. Scott and I were a little weird. We just jumped into an existing group. But not everybody wants to do that. They're uncomfortable with that. So if we have key people that are willing to start, new groups to kind of spearhead them, and then they continue on their way, then that just fosters a sense of community. And once you have a sense of community, people want to be involved in church. And then that small group then starts doing things as small groups, starts doing service things, or starts volunteering for different parts of the church, and then you have something that's healthy and growing. So there is help out there that we can get to that. The other piece to this is to consider hands-on relational mission and service as starting points for the spiritual growth experience. So it used to be historically that the church was the single provider of acts of service opportunities in the community, all right? Anymore, that's not the case, all right? This is a very altruistic society. People want to do things, especially young people. They want to help. They want to do things, as evidenced by all the runs and the walks and the benefits and everything that you could be a part of that makes money for lots of charitable organizations, and that's all fabulous and it's great. But it just points to the fact that people want to do things. So let's be the people that offer people to do things. Let's be the church that offers a community service project so that we are rubbing shoulders as people who love Jesus with other people that may not know Jesus, or they just want to come and help. So we get them to come and help, and then we are relational to them, and they catch our fire, and they go, why do you have so much joy in your heart? And we're like, hey, well, we know somebody's cool. His name's Jesus. Come to church and learn about our Jesus, So service plus relationship equals an opportunity to grow spiritually and to come into church and to learn more about Jesus that we love so much. Spiritual growth is helping people connect with God and become followers of Jesus Christ. And spiritual growth happens when we bring Jesus to people. And it doesn't always, happen like, going, sometimes it happens just through relationships, right? And church membership doesn't have to be the focus. We don't have to bring them in as members before we teach them about Jesus, right? We want to bring them Jesus, and a happy outcome is that they become church members because they love what we're doing and have the joy in our lives, and they want to be part of that community. And that's what we want. We want people, like Jim said, we want people coming because there's something happening here. This is alive. This is an amazing place to be, and I'm meeting Jesus here, and that's fabulous. And I didn't know him before, or whatever it is. Or maybe there are people here that have known Jesus all their life, but they're not connected. If we offer, going back to the community groups or groups that meet outside the church, we offer more of those, then we get even the people that are here more involved in things. And that's part of the recommendation is that we need more of all of that. We need to get people connected into small groups and offer them missional opportunities as a whole church even, so that we can just grab onto that altruistic piece that's out there, and by just showing our joy in all of that, that just brings people to want to be a part of our church, and that's really cool. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Lisa, for getting the mic down to where we need it. So now we're on recommendation number 4. Evaluate and improve structural systems around governance and leadership. Evaluate and improve church structure with clear roles and responsibilities supporting the vision. So that goes back to what Bob talked about, the vision. It's really hurt right now. We have to have a vision. We have to have a common point of reference so that everything we do comes back to what that vision is, so that we're operating in a lean process, so that we're not wasting time with going off on tangents, so we stay focused, that everything we do, whether it's worship or staffing or anything within our realm of improvement, has to be focused on that vision. So we really need to make sure that that's happening. And another thing that Bob alluded to is that status quo is not acceptable at this point. We already see what status quo is doing, and it's bringing us slowly down. And it's so insidious, we're not even recognizing it. So that's one of the things we need to know, is that we need to improve and reevaluate and make sure that we're operating in a clean process. So we need to build the skeleton that supports our vision and uses the spiritual gifts and passions of our members. I talked about this at SPRC too. We had some new members on SPRC, and they said, what are we doing here? How do we identify what we're going to do? And I said to them, we need to make sure that we identify all the spiritual gifts of every person that's on any committee and in any part of the church at all, that they have that opportunity to match the spiritual gift to what they're doing within the church. So once we evaluate that and we have that together, we'll be able to build a skeleton that's lean, that we can operate in a very, I'm going to say a word that no one is going to know. It's a 6 Sigma lean process. And unfortunately, I'm a quality coach, so you're going to get something like that from me every once in a while. Evaluating and simplifying the governance system. We need to work smarter and not harder. You know, we need to make sure that what we do is focused on the vision and that we're working smarter. We want to evaluate the roles and responsibilities like we talked about earlier. We want to be a big church, but we have shrunken down to a medium-sized church, as Con talked about. We need to be operating on the size we're at with a goal to get greater and to have our structure, our staff, our budget poised to meet where we are now, but with that ability to grow in the future. Let's see, evaluate roles and responsibilities. Make changes to support the vision and avoid duplication or working as silos. Okay, I flew on Mayo 1 for 22 years. I am a true believer in redundant systems. We had 2 transmissions on that helicopter. So if this one failed, there was another one. But redundant systems are meant for emergencies and not part of the normal process. We don't duplicate in normal operations. That's waste. You duplicate so you have a backup for an emergency. And that's, I think, one of the things we need to look at when we're redefining how we operate. Now I can't read my handwriting because I'm a little not good at writing right now. So I have to look at this for a second. Oh, I already said that. Huh. Okay. Good. Right. That's right. I'm not going to do it. Okay. Creating systems to help people get involved and volunteer and serve. We want to make it easy for people to be able to come forward and to do those services and to bring those skills, matching those spiritual gifts to what's needed. Defining a budgeting process and work to get funding plans in place for the year in advance, to be proactive, and to make sure that we are good stewards of the money that is brought to our church so that we are using it in the best way possible. And then create a leadership development system that's based on skills, talents, and spiritual gifts. Again, that's much of what I went over with my SPRC, because I am so blessed with that team of people. When I look at that group of people and I see the talent that I have there and the skills that are there, I just know I'm blessed, and I know it's because those spiritual gifts are matched on that team. So this is part of recommendation 4, and if anybody has any questions, I'll take them now. Yes, Abe?
I have a mic.
Yeah. That's part of our emergency redundant system.
Exactly, it's a backup. Looking through the bullet points you have here, and listening to what you're saying about some of these things with matching spiritual gifts, I would just bring up that we did at one point have something, I don't know a lot about it to be honest, but we had something called the Helps group, and we had it on our web page, and it had a list of matching talents and gifts, skills, and that's something that I think that even if it's in a different form, we could draw from that to meet some of these
Right, because nominations shouldn't be just a matter of filling a name into where we're putting people, that we should be matching them to what the task is and the spiritual gifts they have. And is that, as you're developing the new web site, is that part of it now?
It certainly can be. I have a page earmarked, if you will, for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Annie, we talked about that a little bit too, on new people. When new people come, that they have that opportunity to identify, do we have a mechanism for them to identify what their spiritual gifts are so that we can fit them in where it would work well within our congregation so that they can feel valued right away, right? Annie?
And what we did is we went through and we talked about gifts versus talents, the difference, and then at the very end we gave them an inventory, a spiritual gift inventory, and then we tried to match them up to certain things that we have in the church to their gifts, so that they're working with the church, not because we ask them to, but they're working with the church because they see they have a gift, and they work with passion. And it's because when you use your spiritual gifts, it brings you joy.
Yeah. Right.
And so when you're really passionate about something and you're very joyful, you're using a spiritual gift.
Right.
So I really enjoyed, leading the class, and I think the people got a lot out of it.
Thank you.
I know the class that she was referring to, we did several years ago. So what about ongoing training in that area? Because not everybody knows what their spiritual gifts, or what if they've matured and they've developed, other spiritual gifts that they
discovered new spiritual gifts that they didn't know.
So is that something we could offer as a Sunday school or some more small group situations or something? Because I think that's something we probably need to revisit.
Right. Agree. There's a question way back there.
Yeah, I was thought too about, we need to be encouragers. And that's where, again, spiritual gifts are, some people are more aware of them. And I just remember in the Bible, you'll see many times where Christ, he asked people, and they had no clue, but they grew. And and I think by encouraging that sometimes that you know, that's just enough to get somebody going too, so. Because again, relationship-wise, that's why relationships are so important.
Yes, thank you. And Dick has a question or a comment. Sure, Bob's got a mic for you, Dick.
My wife and I have been a part of this congregation here, I guess, about 9 months. Elaine is a member, I'm not, but I'm just sitting here tonight and I'm just amazed at the leadership which you people have shown and the outstanding response you've made to what you propose to do and the leadership that's available in this congregation. And my word, is just a word of encouragement in that I learned a long time ago in athletics, in the Army, and as a pastor that vitally important to keep the mission in front of the troops always. And that every member of the team has a responsibility and has a given ability, I believe, from God and Jesus through the Holy Spirit in the context of the church, and that it is a responsibility of all of us to be a part of the ministry of the church, basically to make disciples of Jesus. And every person, and then I'm going to be quiet, but every person has a story to tell, either in a few words or in action, but each person that knows Jesus has something to say about Jesus in their life. And you folks are on a tremendous journey here, path, and you've got Jim, his commentary tonight. I've sat in on the Iowa conference on this kind of a thing and listened. He did that better than anybody I've heard in 40 years, yeah. And you've had a pastor, too bad he's leaving, but you're going to get another good one, who's done an outstanding job of shepherding. So folks, I just say to you, you're on your way and you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, Jim's got to follow it up now. Thank you.
Well, I don't want to trip you. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Jim O'Brien. Usually I'm up here with bad news. Fortunately, this time I'm up here with good news. I have the fifth recommendation, which I'm going to go over fairly quickly tonight. I notice we're getting close to 8:30, and I don't want to keep you here any longer than necessary. I do need to warn you, if you hear some rumbling, it's not the weather, okay? It's not the weather, so. I kind of wish it was, but not going to be the case. Right. The fifth recommendation has to deal with increasing our visibility so that not only are we known in the community, but we're also expanding our presence, expanding the knowledge of us throughout the community, that we are, if not the best, the most excellent church for those who need to experience God's grace. I mean, if you need to experience God's grace, why not come to Evangel? You will experience it here, you will live it here, you will feel it, and you will walk away with it wanting to share it. Now, in order to do that, one of the things that they're recommending is to become a missional church. Or in order to become a missional church, we need to reach out in the community. We need to get clear of our identity. We currently have an identity based on the youth, the music. We need to expand that, because a church's identity is based on all of our ministries, all of our activities, and all the experiences that are associated with us here at Evangel. You know, our identity is our reputation. So on this next, I guess I'm jumping ahead. Sorry, Abe. You know, our reputation is seen by members of the church and everyone who comes in contact with each of us. Our full identity is reflected in our identity system that includes all the ways that we communicate through worship, website, brochures, word of mouth. Both the design, tone, and words that we choose reflect how we welcome people to our facilities and to our families. Our identity is lived out through every single touch point that provides a point of impression about who we are as a church. That includes the Quick Trip down the street, includes the Wendy's down here, Silverdale Shopping Center, go to Apache Mall. We see the fruits, we begin to see the fruits of our labor when individuals of our community start saying to us what they experience when they come in contact with us. When that is the same as what we have been called to do by our faith, powerful things happen. Now, as we get to the next comment, one of the ways to do that is the consultants are recommending that we must improve our website. And at this point, they recommend that we should look for external expertise, and that is an option. Now, this is a recommendation, but it's something that we've known we've needed to work on. And it's something that Abe has been working on diligently, and we're going to continue to work on that and get that into place. But we do know it is something we need to build on. It's not something we're taking away. So if you think back at the last 4 recommendations, these are all what can we build on? You know, it's all about building. Now, the internet has changed how we connect with the world. So it is essential that we have an excellent website with the updated information. So they've asked us to focus on improving our website. One of the ways that we may have to do that is we may have to be willing to invest financially in creating an excellent website. However, related to the website is the need to increase in the use of social media, especially giving our target group of millennials. The next thing I want to talk about, it has to do with our volume and our curb appeal. Excuse me, our volume, the traffic volume. It's getting late, sorry. You know, the traffic that we have driving by us here is huge. And through the years, we've been really limited on what we can and can't do because of the classification of Broadway being a state highway. Now, we know that the Board of Trustees is working on ways, working with the city and so on, to get approval to make some changes. But that does take time. And along with that, the recommendation is to improve the church's curb appeal and to somehow increase the visibility from the road. When the HCI, when the consultants came in here, they had no idea that, you know, the lilacs are on so-called state property or city property or whatever, and we can't just go out there in the middle of the night and cut them down. And but yeah, I'm not encouraging anyone to do that, mind you. But that's, you know, and we definitely don't want to have winter all year long, so the leaves are not on the bushes and they can see through it. No, we don't want that either. But some of the things they asked us to consider are to improve the signage, maybe add additional signage if we could, maybe use more banners, put more banners on the building. Those are temporary things. Increase the amount of flowers that we have at our entrance so that our entrance really stands out instead of just a canopy. You know, try to make it a little more appealing to people. Jim had mentioned about the first 10 minutes. That first 10 minutes clock starts from the minute they park their car. So give them a few minutes to walk in, and now you're back into, you've only got 5 minutes left, 7 minutes left to make your first impression. So it's a lot smaller amount of time than we really think, so, to make the first impression. Another thing that they recommended was when we have our programs like the trunk or treat or things of that nature. Let's get Hollywood spotlights out there. Let's draw attention to what we're doing. Let's get those things flashing in the sky. You'll see them used down at the car dealers every now and then. Bottom line is, at this point, our church is not easily seen from the roadside. It's confusing where to turn to enter the parking lot, and thus they think that signage could help us to help people to direct them into our parking lot. I mentioned the Quick Trip up the street. As I look at the next one, you know, some of these visitors stopped at these businesses, Quick Trip, O'Reilly's, even across the street. Do you know where Evangel is? You know how embarrassing it is when the people across the street don't even know who Evangel is? It's like, okay. Now that's not to say that they have bad employees over there. You know, I don't want that to walk away, but somehow we got to make ourselves a little more visible to the businesses. The recommendations included things such as visit them frequently, take them treats once a month. Once again, we're back to food. You know, networking, drop off brochures related, you know, to some of the larger events. Ask if we can leave them on the counter or a brochure rack. Can we put them on the bulletin board? So there's, in other words, for those in business and those who are familiar with this, marketing. How do you market yourselves? Now, the fifth component that they mentioned is shifting community service and mission from transactional activities to relational experiences. They're recommending that we develop a strategy for each outreach activity, mission, service, or strong big event that ensures you obtain the names of the people that are served. They even recommended that we read a specific book that is designed to help people learn how to collect names of people when they visit, and to use those names with the hospitality program to reach out to them, offer them the chance to learn more about Christ. Now, one of the last things I just want to touch on is we really need to remember our mission as well as develop the vision. Our mission is what we're going to use to reach and connect with new people in the community, to build the relationships, and ultimately invite to an experience of faith at Evangel. Our vision is, where do we want to be? Where do we want to be 5 years from now? Where do we want to be 10 years from now? Where do we want to be 2 years from now? It's all just a start. It's going to change. And I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, as far as if you want to experience God's grace, come to Evangel. Why go anywhere else? Why not here? So, and with that, I will open it up to questions. Abe? Okay. That's that. Back over here. Yes, please.
I just want to say that as I sit back here, this is our 7th Methodist church. We have lived all over the country. And I have to admit that sometimes I'm kind of hard on you because we know all this stuff second nature, and we've lived through all of this, and it works. It actually works. When you do these things, it works. And so I guess I ask forgiveness first, because we've been here and we've been struggling, and I've been judgmental. But it is because as we go through all this, I have learned that, and I have to have patience because you guys are learning it, and you have to trust me that it works.
Well, thank you. You know, and we love hearing that from each and every one of you. If we don't ask the tough questions, how are we going to answer? How are we going to get answers? You know, then we just become complacent, and we don't want to do that. So thank you very much. And yes, Abe.
Just a couple of things tying into this recommendation with visibility. You're talking about millennials. I'm kind of more in Con's category. I'm a little past millennial, but still a little younger.
Well, when we started this.
When we started, yeah. Oh boy.
Same with you.
So I think the website and just the online presence thing is important. That by no means is all encompassing, but it's very important. The website, just to be clear, is something that I have been creating with my limited knowledge and background. I'm not a web designer. I'm using an online tool called Wix. And where I'm going with this is anybody that's interested in helping out, anybody that knows anybody that's interested in helping out, the core is there. There's some details we need to put into place before we can make the switch and go live, but it's already pretty functional. But we need help in maintenance and improvements. And I work full-time at another place, and I have plenty of other duties here. I have music I do here on top of that. And this is something that I think is cool, and I think we need, but we need some help on that.
I'm going to tease somebody here for just a second. He probably already knows who he is. So Greg, is there something new in IT you'd like to learn? Just kidding, of course. You're welcome. Just want to look out for you, you know. Thank you, Abe. And if I can just take one more second, I do want to say thank you very much to the staff and to Pastor Jeff for all the things that you've done to put together the information that was needed and used to put together this consultation. And without your hard work and diligence in getting the right information at the right time, this probably would not have turned out as well as it did. So thank you very much, and it's greatly appreciated. So with that, if there's no more questions, I will turn it over to Bob.
Well, I lied. I told you we were going to go over the recommendations tonight. Little did I know. My friend. We were going to start it on the implementation planning too. So for those who thought I was just going to go over recommendations tonight, we were going to do that. But Jim, bless your heart. Jim, I got to tell you, Jim has been, I don't want any more meetings. I want to do this stuff. And you could just see that passion in Jim. And you heard the comment on it as well. He's ready to go into implementation. He's got it all planned out, what we need to do for the, anyway. So I'm going to just go through the last steps here and kind of ended up here. But we talked about it before. May 3rd is the vote. So please come out to that if you can. Beyond that, the next 18 months, we would have a coach. By voting yes on all 5, you can't vote on 4 of them and say no to 1. You can't vote on 3 of them and say no to 2. You can't change it to the way you want the one to be. You can't do any of that. You have to vote yes or no on all 5. Once you vote yes on all 5, then we have a coach for 18 months. But that doesn't mean the process ends in 18 months. Because the process of change here, and we've talked about it several places, I think heard it several times, and that is we need to keep making changes because that's what Christ would ask us to do. We really need to keep up with what our community needs. We need to keep up with what the contemporary person would need, and we need to do it in a way that brings people in to meet Jesus. Lisa's exactly right. That's what we're trying to do here. We just have different recommendations on how to make that happen. So it doesn't end after 18 months, it goes on. We should be reevaluating ourselves. We should be re-looking at things like Jim said all the time. And this is a great way to kickstart us to do that. Okay, so final thoughts, roles and responsibilities we talked about. I'm not going to go through that. There will be budget changes. I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, where are we going to get money to do some of this stuff? Well, there will be budget changes, but this is additive. And I heard some things last night at council were really great. Tim Morgan was talking about missions. And he was talking about, we give mission money to some people who work downtown, and we could use the bus to go down there and work with them to bring people back here. Well, that's a net zero, okay? But it's bringing people in here. And that was one way is using mission money we're already using to increase the millennials that come in here. And I thought, my goodness, we're already getting ideas like that that are just fantastic. And we haven't even said yes to this yet. So, yes, there is going to be a change to the budget. We need to give the ability for a millennial church within a church to be able to start up. That's going to cost some money. But we've already set aside 1% of our budget in 2015 to kickstart this. We did that last year when we committed to it. So 1% of our budget, about $6,000 or $7,000, is already in the pot to do this. So don't let that affect your vote. The right thing to do is the right thing for what God is asking your heart to do, not, can we open our checkbook, okay? What else? This isn't how to do it. Jim may have talked a little bit about how to do it at times, but it's recommendations that we should be doing. We'll figure out, us as Evangel, what is our vision? The reason our church doesn't have a vision isn't because Jesus didn't say, go and make disciples of all people and all nations. It's because we need to figure out what that means for Evangel. How do we bring in the people that are around us, that are coming by Quick Trip and asking us those questions? And then lastly, pray. There's been thousands of prayers about this process already in Evangel. But keep praying. It's what God wants us to do. It's what God has asked us to do. And you need to pray some more about this process and what's right. And then pray about your vote and what you're going to do after that vote in the next 18 months and then beyond that as well. So that's all really important. Yeah.
Within the state of Minnesota, are there other churches that are looking at this HCI?
Yeah, the question is, in the state of Minnesota, there are
Within
other
the state
churches
of Minnesota.
looking at this HCI. There's actually several different programs depending on your church size. There's a smaller church one. There's a number of churches, I think it's around 10, that are looking at that right now. And then there's, about 9 or 10, probably in our size, that we went through the education with those churches. And so we got to see Worthington, and we got to see, a couple of the other ones. And so that's an important point, because you not only get a coach, you also get pastors that are going through this that can talk to each other, and you get congregations that can actually talk to each other and find out what's working for you, what isn't, and where you're running into problems. Yeah, Jeff.
Just a note on that. In the next 7 years, the goal is for 20 churches, each of the next 7 years, to do some version of this. So that 7 years from now, roughly 140 churches will have gone through some initiative towards health.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Reach, Renew, Rejoice, which we're over the next 5 years putting $20,000 into, this is part of that overall program to reach, renew, and rejoice for churches that exist and then for new churches. Yeah.
Phil, who is coming among us, has participated. So this will be great to have Phil Strom here, who has participated in this and adds his expertise to what we're doing.
Yeah. Thanks, Becky. Yeah.
What if you have another commitment on May 3rd? How can you vote?
It was a question, if you're not going to be here on May 3rd, can you vote? The answer is no. You have to be here. That is one of the rules. And unfortunately, that's going to hit a number of people, even within the leadership team here. So,
Why is that, though?
Jeff, you might want to answer that one. Why is it that you have to be present to vote?
Well, the easy answer is by the United Methodist Book of Discipline. That is a standing rule that exists for all our churches. When a congregational vote occurs, you have to be in attendance. It's just a bylaw.
Do you have to be a member of Evangel's Club?
Yes.
What does it take for it to pass?
It's it is a majority decision, but that's, boy, if we got a majority decision and it was 51% to 49%, boy, I think the leadership team would come together and we'd be asking ourselves some real tough questions there. We had, basically about 110 to 10 on the votes when we did, the big capital campaign to come together and redo the sanctuary.
Bob, you want to tell them what the difference is between whether it passes or not? Whether a yes or a no vote is the end?
Yeah, if we do vote yes on it, then we get the coach, we commit the money, and we start this process for the next 18 months. If we don't vote yes on this, every one of these things is still important. We're not going to walk away from these. We're going to be talking about them at council. We're going to be doing it anyway, but we won't have a coach. We won't have a commitment to do it in the same way, and we won't have those other resources, whether it's pastors, whether it's other congregations and that kind of thing. So, good questions.
You just, in your closing comments here, you mentioned something about when we do the church in the church for the millennials. That's only a suggestion.
It's a suggestion. If I said when we do the church in the church, it's me jumping ahead.
So all 5 things are very, I'm not going to say necessarily vague, but when they put in the details, those are just suggestions.
Those are suggestions. This is not a how. I tried to say that too. This is a recommendation. That's their recommendation. What we want to do is make sure the millennials that are part of this church, and Con said this, are the ones who get together and say, how do we do this? What should we be doing? That's who should be making decisions in a biblical context with people that are mature Christians as well. We don't want, and I'm not implying the millennials in this church aren't that way, but if we bring in outside millennials, which is one of the things we've talked about, to do some of this stuff, we want to make sure it's with the context of this is what we're about at Evangel as well. I didn't say that very well, so apologize for that. Okay, I know we've gone over time. I want to just go through and just show you these recommendations again, and that's all I'm doing. I'm not going to talk about them or anything. So the first one was reaching millennials. You've heard that over and over again from everybody because it's part of all of our recommendations. Reimagine the current Sunday worship service. Jim very eloquently talked through possibilities there. Third one is develop that spiritual growth process. Lisa talked about that and how we might do that with entry points for different age groups and things. Fourth one is evaluate the structural systems. We talked about the skeleton kind of thing. What's our skeleton going to look like as we grow? And then the last one is increase visibility, and that was in many ways, whether it be the website, whether it be the outside, that kind of thing. So those are the 5 that will be required to either vote yes or no on May 3rd, if you can make it, unfortunately. Anything else? Any closing comments anybody wants to make?
Yeah, this is for the working 5 guys.
Thank you. It's been a year process for us, but this is just the beginning. We have great things in store for us, and you can tell we're all excited. So thank you for saying that. Anything else? All right, I'm just going to close in prayer real quickly then. Dear Lord, you are with us. You are with us because we are with you, Lord. We worship you because you've asked us to, and because this is what we're made to do, Lord, is to worship you and to be your hands and feet on this earth to reach others. Your son, Jesus, told us that. He asked us to go forth and do that, and he said, go. And we need to do that. And Lord, we've done great things in this church, but we have so much more in the future, and we know that because it is your church, and our hearts are with you and want to be your men and women of service for this community of Rochester. So help us to go forward as we go from this meeting into the vote in the next week or so. And then beyond that, Lord, just help us to do your will in whatever we're doing with this. thank you for what you've given us so far, and thank you for the people of this church, your church, and our future. It is in Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, everybody. Sorry we went over, but thanks for coming.